Good evening, everybody. Welcome back. Happy Friday. Happy Friday. Happy Juneteenth, everybody. It's a national holiday. It's Juneteenth. So today we're reading some African history instead of the French history. No, we're not. We're not. We're gonna read some real history. But how's everybody doing? All two of you. Well, two is better than nothing. A little bit of Stephen Wake for our starting soon music. He's one of my favorite guitarists. He does mostly Irish music, but he's really good, as you can tell. Big fan of him. Used to listen to him a lot a couple of years ago. Haven't listened to him as much recently, but I still come back to him every once in a while. Trying not to do... Oh, you're sick? Why are you sick? That's cringe. Oh, trying not to die. I get you. Yeah, it was me a couple weeks ago. We got a flu going on around here. Yeah, at least I think it's a flu. It's something like that. It's fun. I caught it a couple Saturdays ago. It wasn't, normally a flu isn't that bad, but I've always had a weak stomach. And so anytime I get sick, I will be puking a lot. And that was my Saturday a couple weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. Yeah, mine felt like a flu too. I couldn't really tell just cuz I couldn't tell if I had a fever just cuz my body temperature was elevated from exerting myself via puking. So, I couldn't tell. I assumed it was a flu. But it only lasted a little bit. But that's cool. Let's see. Yeah, we're reading chapter 12 today. We finished up chapter 11, which was kind of the preview, the European background. European background, specifically the Byzantine and Mediterranean background. The stream before, we went over the Anglo-Saxons in England and the Slavs in the Balkans, the Balkan areas. And then we did not get through much Wednesday. We got through 6 pages or something. I don't know. I was rambling on about something. Oh, but here is a very cool thing, and we shall unveil it. We have a dictionary, baby. I don't know how to spell. Dictionary. We finally got the dictionary. I looked into some translation plugins, but they all use paid translation things, and the free use ones all suck. So if I wanted anything that was decent, I would have to pay for an API key, I think it was called. And then I'd be able to use a translation thing, but that all got very complicated. So if I need to translate something, we're just going to pull up Google Translate again. But we have a dictionary. It took about 4 weeks. I know I promised a dictionary a long time ago. Hark, can you hear the tractor? Me pa is out doing stuff on the tractor. Spreading wood chips, most likely. He has a wood chip garden. Yes, I live with my parents. I don't live in a basement. Where I live is we couldn't build basements in this state if we wanted to because the ground is just water and clay. It's terrible. So no, I don't live in my parents' basement. I live in a shack next to my parents' house, which is probably why the internet isn't great. Which is why I'm gonna end up getting my own. Getting me some Starlink. I just have to pull the trigger on it. But will that happen? No clue. We will figure it out. Anything else going on? Not really. I mean, yeah, nothing really. I've been thinking about getting back into essay writing. I can tell you right now it's probably not going to happen, but I have been thinking about it. Mainly because of this book I've been reading on the side. One of the books I was considering reading for this stream, for the next, once we finish this book, I was considering reading this one. It's the Economic and Social Evolution of European Civilization, something like that. I was considering reading that, but then I decided we were going to just kind of continue this time period, you know. We end with 814, let's jump to 930 AD, something like that. Just kind of continue this timeline. But the one I've been reading has been pretty interesting. It is Alan Dopsch. I think he's an Austrian historian. Very, very intelligent man, it definitely seems. But the first chapter of the book is essentially him going through like 25 or 30 different historians and their views on how the Germans lived before they became part of the Roman Empire. Very dry, but I like that kind of thing, so I find it fascinating. But he goes through kind of starting with the 17th century, the 1600s, the Voltaire and the humanists of the Enlightenment period, and then some of the other guys, some of their theories about not prehistoric. Technically, it is prehistoric Germany. It's not prehistoric times, but before Caesar, we don't really have a good history. The Germans didn't write anything down before they became Romanized. And so it's really hard to tell what exactly their societies were like. Archaeology is probably the only way we can get anything definite, but even then I don't trust the conclusions archaeologists draw because they're all retarded. Because, you know, I won't get into archaeologists, but they're an interesting bunch. But yeah, there's several different theories. In this chapter, he lists off four different theories. Two of them, as far as I can tell, kind of by the same person. Justus Moser. It's a German sociologist, something like that. It's an interesting theory, but his theory is basically that the ancient Germans were communists. You have kind of this theory that they were all savages and barbarians, because Caesar and Tacitus are our primary sources for that time period for the most part, and they refer to them as barbarians. Well, it seems that our understanding of what a barbarian is and Caesar's understanding of what a barbarian is are different. Because the term barbarian, I'm not going to get into that because I'm still not solid on what he meant by that. But it seems that our idea of barbarian comes from what the humanists thought, which is Voltaire, like I said, in the Enlightenment era, thinkers, because they were right after the Renaissance, and they were still riding the coattails of this revival of Roman and Greek civilization. Greek and Roman style architecture, poetry, statues, art, stuff like that. And so they considered the barbarians, the savages, and this destructive tsunami that destroyed the Roman Empire, and it was something separate from what Rome was. And so that's their view of them. They're these uneducated savages. They come only to destroy, and then European civilization springs up from them, and the Roman Empire has no influence on what comes, which is obviously not true. I mean, we can read this book and see. This book will tell us that that's just not true. The humanists were extremely wrong in that regard. Then you have this idea that they're kind of this communistic lifestyle, because Caesar says that they didn't have private property as far as he knew. And so this Moser guy, he comes to two kind of conclusions. If I remember correctly, it might not have been him coming up with both of them, but it was his idea that there was this theory of freedom, that they were free men. They didn't really have any ruler, but they kind of organized themselves based off of location, which I don't necessarily believe to be true. I think they were definitely a hierarchical society. Okay, we see later as they enter into Roman lands, they have kings and they have chieftains. So I need to look into that theory, get it more solid, what exactly he means by this theory of freedom. But then he gets into the Mark Association, where it's essentially these land areas were divided into marks, MRCK or MARK. And that's kind of really this communistic idea where they think that they lived in communes, essentially. It was communal land, and everybody grazed their livestock wherever they wanted, and all the land was fair use, and that I don't buy much either. Mainly because of how he gets to that idea, because he takes what exists at his time period, which is the 1700s, and he kind of just applies it back to the ancient Germans. And then the fourth, that's the Mark Associations theory, and that they were a collective group, and that they would elect a leader. And so it's kind of this weird, like I said, kind of communist type of theory. And then there's a fourth one that I don't remember anything about. I need to study up on it a little more, just because I do find these theories interesting. But I think there definitely was a hierarchical. I think they were a hierarchical society, 100%. It's very easy to see that they were, but they definitely seem to be not aristocratic, but similar, kind of a similar concept, I would imagine. But again, I don't know all that well exactly what the Germans looked like before they were Romanized. But I would think they had something of a primitive version of what a real civilization would have, mainly because they integrated so easily. The Goths came into Rome, and they integrated into Rome very easily. Obviously there was hardships, and people died, and it was invasions, and they were pillaging and whatnot. But they became Roman relatively quickly, and they immersed themselves into the Roman society, and they wanted to become Roman. And within a couple of generations, the Visigoths, the Ostrogoths especially, are almost as Roman as the Romans who come before, just because they were so good at integrating themselves. And obviously they brought some of their culture with them and whatnot. But that's just kind of my 2 cents on it. But I guess we're 15 minutes in. We should probably start reading some of the book. Yeah, we probably should. Hold on. I'm gonna mute for a second and get more water. I was working up a little bit outside before I came in, and I'm thirsty. Okay. All right. We're back. We have water. Okay, like I said, on Wednesday, we talked about the Byzantine background of the Franks. Mostly what he focused on was the iconoclastic heresy, kind of what happened, and its effects and repercussions on the West, on the relationship between the Byzantine Empire and the West, because the West was obviously united with the Pope, especially when it came to liturgical and doctrinal matters. The West was united with the Pope. The East, in a large way, was also united with the Pope in that regard, but there was a large contingent who was united with the Emperor, who was the origin of this heresy. And so that kind of just helps you understand why the Franks come to power, because there's a void that needs to be filled. The Byzantine Empire is essentially cut off from the West. The Slavs in the Balkans basically cut off a direct link to the East. You still have here. Let me pull up the old map. Give you a little bit of a. No, it's not in there. Where is it? Here it is. Let's pull up the trusty old map. It says CE on it. I know that's cringe, but at this point, you have essentially a Slav takeover in this region. Oh. Having some technical difficulties here with my eye. My contact lens is killing me. Oh, okay. We're muting again, and we're going to take out our contact lenses because this is rough. Sorry about that. I think I got some dust or something in my eye, and my contact lenses weren't happy. So we're swapping. We swapped to the glasses. All right. So as I was saying, by this time period, you have a Slavic takeover in this area. Not long before this whole area is under Greek rule, Byzantine rule. You do have the invasions of the Lombards in Italy, so this section and this section are still Byzantine aligned. But with this cut off, and you're starting to have attacks from these Muslim ports, because Islam has conquered a large part. By the time of the iconoclastic heresy, which is 730, this whole area is conquered by Islam. All of Spain is conquered, and you have Islamic ships that are going out and raiding, and so it's harder for Constantinople to offer relief and assistance to Italy. And so ideologically, not necessarily ideologically, but from a religious standpoint, you start having a division, because the emperor will say one thing and then the pope will disagree. The pope will uphold the doctrine and he will uphold the faith. And the pope and the emperor isn't going to like that. And so you start having a divide there over religious authority. And then because of this whole landmass falling away from Byzantine rule, you have a division of secular rule as well, where this whole area is starting to rely more on Rome and the Pope and less on the Byzantine Empire for assistance and for aid and for just governorship, for rulership. And eventually the Pope can't really do much about it because he's a religious figure. He has secular power, he has temporal power, but he doesn't have much. He can protect Rome, but that's pretty much it. And so you have a void that needs filling here, and it is filled by the Franks. But we will get into that. That is what we're reading. All right, chapter 12, the Franks. At the death of Clovis in 511, his kingdom was divided among his 4 sons, as if it had been a private estate. This Frankish custom of inheritance is a cardinal fact in Merovingian history. To it is due much of the incoherence and confusion of the period. Following the death of successive rulers, continual partitions are made, often based on purely personal considerations. The east of France, for instance, was combined on this occasion with the Auvergne, and no account was taken of races or nationalities. But in spite of this division, the kingdom was still regarded as a unity, and its contemporary title, Regnum Francorum, implies, as its contemporary title, Regnum Francorum implies, and the 4 sons of Clovis recognized their common duty to complete the conquest begun by their father. The 4 capitals, moreover, Reims, Orleans, Paris, and Soissons, were situated at the extremities of each domain, in close proximity to each other, thus forming a center of German influence. I actually think I have a map of this map. There's the Eastern Mediterranean, Malta, let's see, maps of the empire. Byzantine Empire, no, this is the Roman Empire. Oh yeah, here's the division of Gaul. So you have Paris, Kingdom of Paris, Kingdom of Orleans, sorry. Soissons, and Reims. Yeah, so this is your landmass. These 2 belong to one son, these 2 belong to one son, this belongs to one son. And then Burgundy, oh, you have a 5th. I guess he'll get into that. The dynastic story of the next half-century is a long series of murders, annexations, revolts, and repartitions. Unity was temporarily restored in 558 when, out of all of the descendants of Clovis, only Clotaire remained. In spite of civil wars, the consolidation and extension of the conquests of Clovis had steadily proceeded. Burgundy had been finally subdued in 534 and now formed part of the Frankish dominions, though its 100 years of independent existence had given it a certain unity of culture which was never completely lost. Provence, which had once belonged to Theodoric, the Ostrogoth ruler of Spain, was relinquished by his successors about the same time. Septimania, the district lying between the Rhone and the Pyrenees, still remained in Visigoth hands, and Brittany acknowledged no more than a nominal overlordship on the part of the Franks. Roughly speaking, however, Gaul had been conquered up to its natural boundaries. Outside these limits, Frankish arms were not so successful. Expeditions into North Italy and Spain led to no permanent result, though the weakness of Ostrogoths and Visigoths prevented any possibility of reprisals. Theudebert, the most enterprising son of Clovis, had planned at one time to join the Gepids and Lombards in a concerted raid upon Thrace, and is even said to have contemplated an attack upon Byzantium itself. But too much must not be made of this. Theudebert was neither a Charlemagne nor an Otto, and there is no evidence to indicate that any real political insight lay behind these grandiose schemes. The real advance during this period was in the eastward direction. The Franconian conquests of Clovis were rounded off. Bavaria yielded allegiance. Thuringia was subdued. The Saxon tribes of the Great Plains of central Germany proved more recalcitrant and drove back the invaders with heavy loss. A beginning, however, has been made of the process which Charlemagne was to bring to fulfillment, and the way was being prepared for the Christian missionaries who were later to undertake the conversion of Germany. Saint Bonaventure, or Saint Boniface. Bonaventure. One of the Bonas. A great contrast is presented by the character of the next half-century. Conquest now gives place to civil war. Expeditions into North Italy continued as before, but no permanent annexations followed. Efforts were made to wrest Septimania from the Visigoths, and the walls of Carcassonne and Nîmes witnessed the clash of arms. But the district remained subject to the rulers of Spain and passed later under the Muslim yoke. Bretons and Basques still maintained their independence, and the Avar raids on Thuringia, which took place at this time, forbade any further expansion on the eastern frontier. The wave of conquest had spent itself, and within the Frankish realm, the forces of dissolution were in full play. The pages of Gregory of Tours hold for us the story of this time. They chronicle pestilence and famine, murder and sudden death. Beggars and highwaymen infest the Rhone and even the roads, and even the churches are not safe from rapine. The Meroving princes, in their internecine feuds, call to their aid the nobles of their kingdoms. The result is seen in the growth of feudal independence and lawlessness, in the antagonism of Austrasia and Neustria, Burgundy and Aquitaine, which appear destined to form separate principalities. Clotaire, the last surviving son of Clovis, died in 561, leaving 4 sons. Of these, Caribert, king of Paris, lived only until 567. Siegbert, king of Metz, and Chilperic, king of Soissons, carried on a bitter contest for supremacy, while the 4th brother, Guntram, king of Orleans and Burgundy, endeavored to hold the balance between them. The enmity between Siegbert and Chilperic became even more deadly when both married royal sisters, Brunhilda and Galswintha, from the luxurious and civilized Visigoth court. Chilperic's wife, Galswintha, was found strangled in suspicious circumstances, and Chilperic returned to his former mistress, Fredegund. Shortly afterwards, Siegbert, in the hour of victory over Chilperic, was brought down by the poisoned daggers of Fredegund's agents. Brunhilda was made prisoner, but managed to escape to her son's kingdom, where she planned revenge for the double murder. The period is dominated henceforth by the figure of Brunhilde, queen and regent of Austrasia, that is, the eastern Franks, and by her struggle against Nuestria, the domain of Chilperic in north and west. Newest, i.e., the latest conquests. Chilperic is a type of the Merovingian despot. His two ruling passions are the increase of his wealth and the extension of his borders. In pursuance of these aims, he sells bishoprics, levies oppressive taxes, and fines his wealthy subjects, while no treachery is too mean, no cruelty too savage, in his schemes against rival princes of the Meroving house. To Gregory of Tours, he is the Nero and Herod of his age. Such qualities are common form among his contemporaries, but Chilperic has claims to originality. Despising the Germanic tongue, he composed Latin hymns and poems. 4 letters were added to the alphabet by his decree. Interesting. The 3 persons of the Trinity were condemned as anthropomorphic follies, and his free thinking even challenged the Salic law, that bulwark of Frankish custom, in an attempt to allow the inheritance of women in certain cases. Now, this isn't necessarily true. It's the basis. The Salic law is the basis of the Frankish law, but their law is pretty much German. Henri Pirenne talks about this in his book Muhammad and Charlemagne. And I should pull up what he says about the Salic law, but he essentially says that it's not as important as everyone thinks it is. It is important. It is the basis of their law, but the Frankish law is, for all intents and purposes, Roman law. It's a continuation of the law from the Roman Empire. That's what he says. I don't know enough about the Salic law to agree or disagree. But that's getting off topic. We're talking about Brunhilde and not Salic law. Brunhilde, his principal opponent, presents an even more remarkable personality. For more than 30 years, she controlled the destinies of Austrasia, holding her own against the attacks of Chilperic, the arrogance of nobles, and the insubordination of her sons and grandsons. From 575 to 596, she ruled as regent for her son. By the help of loyal vassals and a timely coalition with Burgundy, she hunted down her treacherous nobles. One perished in the flames of a burning castle, another was killed by tiles hurled through the roof of the bishop's chapel at Verdun. Her 2 grandsons were set on the thrones of Burgundy and Austrasia, but Brunhilde still held the reins of power. You go, queen. When the Austrasian prince revolted against her tyranny, she turned his brother against him, and he was defeated and put to death. But the end of her long career was in sight. In 613, the Burgundian ruler died, and Brunhilde's efforts to combine Austrasia and Burgundy under her great-grandson were unsuccessful. The nobles of Austrasia, led by Arnulf, Bishop of Metz, and Pippin, mayor of the palace, the founders of the Caroling fortunes, called in the Neustrian king to their aid, and Brunhilde was taken prisoner on the shore of Lake Neufchâtel. She was tortured for 3 days, and finally her body was tied to the tail of a vicious horse, which was set loose and lashed into fury. Yeah, Chilperic, not this Chilperic guy, he sounds like a real jerk. Arnulf, Bishop of Metz. I wonder if that is Saint Arnulf, the inventor of beer. Pippin, you're going to see this term a lot going forward. Mayor of the Palace. Keep an eye on it. Mayors of the Palace are very, very, very important. Kind of like a Secretary of State position. Kind of adjacent to that. The later mayors of the house, just mayors of the palace at the time of Charles Martel, they basically held all of the power. Brunhilde had known how to control the forces of her realm. She had treated the church with great firmness, at the same time making many gifts to bishoprics and monasteries. The correspondence carried on with her by Pope Gregory the Great shows that he realized her power in church and state and the importance of her influence in France. Under Clotaire II, who now succeeded to the throne of the whole kingdom, the nobles seem to have won the day. In Austrasia especially, their cooperation had been decisive in gaining the victory, and the price they extorted was seen in the Edict of 614. The Church asserted its independence and demanded freedom of episcopal elections and extended powers for the ecclesiastical courts, while the landed aristocracy secured a triumph over the court officials, since the counts were henceforward to be chosen from the districts they were to administer, local and hereditary influence thus having full play. Considerable autonomy was granted to Austrasia and Burgundy. Each of the kingdoms now had its distinct character and separate administration, headed by the mayors of the palace, who were as much the representatives of the interests of the local nobility as they were of the king. Already the kingdoms themselves were being parceled out into seigneuries, carrying the disintegration farther still. At this point, however, the process was arrested for a brief space, and the reign of Dagobert, 629 to 639, the last great Meroving, witnesses a final burst of vigor on the part of the central power. For 10 years he ruled the whole of France, virtually relegating his brother to the position of warden of the Basque marches. The arts flourished at his brilliant and scandalous court, the goldsmith's activities being specially favored. Abbeys were founded, and there was considerable missionary enterprise. Bretons and Basques were made to swear allegiance, and Frankish influence was felt in the affairs of Italy and Spain. Dagobert even concluded an alliance with Heraclius to provide for concerted action against the Slavs and Bulgars of Central Europe, who threatened alternately the Rhine and Danube frontiers of France and Byzantium. Missionary enterprise from Ireland. A lot of Irish monks settled in France. And England. They played a big part in the conversion of England. Much to their chagrins, actually. There was a quote from Pierre Riche's book, which is a quote from one of the monks where... Oh, what was the quote? I bring up the quote and then I forget the quote. I think I took a screenshot of it. It's a hilarious quote. It's worth bringing up. Let's see if I can find it here real quick. Let's see, when was I reading? Let's see. No, that's... I have a lot of screenshots of quotes from books on this phone. Let's see. Yeah, it should be around here. Mm-hmm. Yep. You know, it's around here somewhere. Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay, yep. Why do I have so many screenshots of books? Do I not have it? I better have it. No, those are all from Russia and the Universal Church. Ah, here it is. Yeah. So this is talking about the Celts in England after they were conquered by the British. So he says, the Celts avoided all contact with their Anglo-Saxon conquerors and refused to work for their conversion to Christianity so as not, quote, to find them again in paradise. You know, it's not exactly a very Christian mindset, but it is hilarious. The Irish still hate the English. It's like nothing has changed. The more things change, the more they stay the same. And something that will never change is the Irish hate the British. And that's just That's just how things are. But on the death of Dagobert, the kingdom was divided into two, and the decentralizing process resumed its course. Even during his lifetime, Austrasia had demanded a separate ruler in the person of the king's son, and the separatist tendencies of the three parts of France now showed themselves more openly. The history of the following century is the story of the rival ambitions of the mayors. Meroving princes are born and die, short-lived phantoms worn out by premature debauchery, roi fainéant, exhibiting at best a weak piety or a pliant amiability. All right, let's get a little translation going here. Oh, that's funny. So, fainéant, roi fainéant, is that? Yeah, roi fainéant means do-nothing king or lazy king. It's a French term primarily used to refer to the later kings of the Merovingian dynasty after they seemed to have lost their initial powers of dominion. Yeah, so it means the do-nothing kings. That's funny. But the real power lies in the hands of the great officers of state, whose struggles for personal ascendancy decide the issues of the kingdom. The position of the mayors was a contradictory one in certain respects. They were at the same time, as we have already noticed, the representatives of the king and the heads of the local nobility. When these rival interests clashed, some of the mayors took one side, some the other. Grimoald, mayor of Austrasia, had the hardihood to declare himself against both. In 656, he banished the Meroving prince to Ireland and set his own son on the throne. But the time was not yet ripe for such an adventure. He was overpowered by the nobles and delivered over to the king of Nuestria, who put him to death. 100 years were to elapse before his descendants, the Carolings, found themselves strong enough to exercise the regal power in their own name. And there's a very important reason why they were able to do this. Not just because of force of arm, but it was also because the Pope said they could. Pepin the Short went to the Pope and said, "These guys don't have any power. Can I be king?" And the Pope said, "Yes, you can be king." And Pepin became king of France. Meanwhile, the civil wars went on, each mayor striving to exalt his own province, either to satisfy the king whom he served, or to placate the land-grabbing instincts of his fellow nobles. Under the fierce energy of its mayor, Ebroin, the Neustrian kingdom gained the upper hand in 657, but Austrasia demanded its own mayor and king, and Burgundy, led by the Bishop of Autun, afterwards canonized as Saint Leger, likewise asserted its independence. Leger was captured and put to death with cruel tortures, which won for him in later times the crown of martyrdom, and Nuestria once more resumed its hegemony. I don't think my... Does this have a pronunciation guide? No, it doesn't. It doesn't have a pronunciation. Yet another thing I need to add. Hegemony. I've looked this up, but it's one of those words I'm always going to pronounce wrong. Hegemony. The supremacy of Ebroin was maintained until his death in 681, but already a new star had risen above the horizon. Pippin II, leader of the Austrasian nobles, had suffered defeat at the hands of Ebroin, but a few years later, taking advantage of the dissension which prevailed among the Neustrians, he marched into the rival kingdom and on the field of Tertry, near Péronne, overcame all resistance and established himself as the real ruler of France. The Battle of Tertry was not a victory of the Germans of the east over the Romans of the west, for Pippin had gained the support of a large Neustrian faction. It was in appearance a victory of the nobles over the royal authority which had been championed by Grimoald and his successor, but in reality it was the personal triumph of Pippin. From henceforward he was master of France, bestowing mayorships on members of his family, and ruling as a king in all but name. It is thus virtually the end of the Merovingians and the beginning of the Caroling dynasty. Let's see, how much more we got? Good bit. It's a pretty decent chapter. I don't think we're going to get through all of it tonight. Oh, let's see. Hold on, how many pages have we read? 231, 2, 3, 4. We've read 6 pages. We need to make we need to make some more progress than this. I'm not planning on stopping right now, but yeah, we still got time. It's 7:45. Yeah. So from 687 to 714, Pippin had controlled the country, and his strong hand had restored it to a prominent place in the politics of Western Europe. At his death, the fortunes of his family and the unity of France hung once more in the balance. His 2 legitimate sons had died before him, and his grandsons were not yet of age. Burgundy and Neustria split asunder, and the general disorder spread to all parts. In the northeast, the Frisians devastated the country about Cologne. The Saxons farther south had followed suit, while Aquitaine seized the opportunity once again to proclaim its independence. But the Caroling house had found its champion as well as its name-giver. Charles Martel, third son of Pippin, triumphed successively over all obstacles. Using, like his father, the Austrasian power, he quelled the Neustrian dissidents, reduced the Aquitanians to submission, restored the eastern frontiers in a series of successful campaigns, and in 732 routed the Arab forces on the field of Poitiers, following up his victory 5 years later by an expedition into Provence. Aquitanian independence, however, proved to have been only scotched, not killed, and the Arabs still retained possession of Narbonne, from whose walled shelter they sallied forth upon the cities of the Rhone valley. It was Pippin, son of Charles, who finally accomplished the reduction of Aquitaine. His conquest was deliberate, successful, and permanent. More statesmanlike than his father, he took care to conciliate the church by studied favors, and to form a loyal party among the Aquitanians themselves. His careful policy had shown itself earlier in a notable event. In 751, having obtained from the Pope a favorable response to his project, Pippin assumed the crown of France, the last of the Merovingians being tonsured and relegated to the monastic life. 3 years later, Pippin was formally crowned at St. Denis by Pope Stephen II, who had crossed the Alps to seek Frankish aid against the Lombards. Coronation was a novel rite for the Franks. It set the seal upon Pippin's election to the kingdom, which had already been approved by the assembly of the people. A little note here, Pope Stephen II was met at a certain point on his way into to Saint Denis by Charlemagne. Pippin, who was Charlemagne's dad, sent his son Charles to meet Pope Stephen and to basically go with him to the coronation, to escort him. Let's see. All right, so yeah, 3 years later, Pippin was formally crowned at St. Denis by Pope Stephen II, who had crossed the Alps to seek Frankish aid against the Lombards. Coronation was a novel rite for the Franks. It set the seal upon Pippin's election to the kingdom, which had already been approved by the assembly of the people. The theory of divine right vested in a single family was to assume a greater significance in subsequent French history, but even at this period, the sacred unction of the Church, with its scriptural precedents, was felt to be necessary in that it counterbalanced the sacrilege done to the Merovingians, descendants of the legendary sea god, who retained, even in their decline, the mysterious sanctity of far-off pagan times. Interesting. Not sure what he means by sacrilege done to the Merovings. Were they the sacrilege in that they were kicked off the throne because they were puppets? Because they were do-nothing kings. The alliance of Pope and Caroling was to alter the whole course of European history. Which was to alter the whole course of European history was no casual event. It is true that the form which it took was due to the policy of certain outstanding personalities, but the converging influences which made that policy desirable were the outcome of slow-moving developments. Clovis, it will be remembered, had created what amounted to a national church. This independence was continued under his descendants, and even Gregory the Great, in spite of his legate at Arles, could not enforce his claims to authority, but was obliged to limit himself to the employment of indirect influence through such a medium as Brunhilde. The confusion caused by the civil wars was reflected in the state of the church. In the divided realm, no general councils could be held, and the bishops were embroiled in the political discord. Temporal and ecclesiastical powers were intermingled, and the voice of the papacy could not make itself heard amid the din of arms. When order was restored under the Carolings, it was found necessary to complete the political union of France by more strictly organizing the administration of the church. Charles Martel had only increased the disorder, for he had rewarded his followers with gifts of bishoprics and abbeys. But Pippin and his brother Carloman, who afterwards retired to a monastery, were favorable to the projects of reform set before them by Boniface, and a series of decrees followed, regulating the hierarchy and morals of the church in France. Boniface, an English missionary, had already performed notable services in Germany, where he had converted vast numbers of the heathen. His remarkable achievements will be referred to again, but the significance of his work in the present connection lies in his close relations with the papacy. Boniface was a loyal servant of the Pope. From every bishop under his jurisdiction, he demanded an oath of submission to the Church of Rome, St. Peter, and his vicar. Pippin and Carloman, while maintaining sovereign rights over the Church, frequently had occasion to consult the Pope, and the bond between the two great powers of the West became gradually closer. Already Charles Martel had received an appeal for succor from the papacy, hard-pressed in its struggle from the Lombards. He had not responded, for his position was not sufficiently secure to allow him to embark on foreign and hazardous campaigns. The Lombards, moreover, were the natural allies of the Franks, and had joined him in his warfare against the Saracens. There was also the position of the rulers of Byzantium to be considered, who still as Roman emperors laid claim to the overlordship of Italy. But events were moving rapidly to a conclusion. In 751, the Lombard king hurled his forces upon Ravenna, the exarch fled, and the Byzantine domains in North Italy were lost forever. In the same year, with papal encouragement, Pippin assumed the crown, displacing the last Merovings. The Lombard menace to the papacy now became an instant peril. Absolute submission was demanded, and the fall of Rome appeared inevitable. Pippin still hesitated, and 2 years later the Pope himself crossed the Alps on his memorable mission, which was destined to bring the Frankish forces into Italy and to perpetuate the union of Pope and Caroling in the Holy Roman Empire. Let's go. Let's see. Yeah, we're not gonna... It's Friday. We can stop here. I know we weren't gonna get much farther. But it's Friday. We can cut a little short today. These last two streams we haven't gotten far. I've been in a rambling mood apparently. We made it 1, 2, 6, 8.5 pages. Better than Wednesday. I think Wednesday we made it 5. We didn't get far on Wednesday. But yeah, we'll cut it short here. When I start a section like this, I normally want to finish it, and this one's a long one. And I think we're gonna leave that for Wednesday. My voice is a little scratchy too, so yeah, we'll leave it at that. Well, thank you. I try my best with the commentary. You know, it's hard talking off the cuff. It's not something I'm used to. Not something I'm used to doing. It kind of turns more into rambling, which is fine, you know. I enjoy listening to people ramble. I don't know if people enjoy listening to me ramble though. But yes, we're finally getting into Charlemagne, it looks like. So this next chapter, the papacy, papal influence in England, Germany, and France. The Italian balance of power. This next chapter looks like it'll be interesting. Not a terribly long chapter. $53. I mean, it's decently long. 15 pages. It'll be interesting. It should be. Looks like it'll be a good chapter. Yeah, another thing I need to look into. So this book ends at 814 with Charlemagne's death. Sorry, spoiler alert. Charlemagne dies. He dies at the end of this book. I'm sorry I spoiled it for you. But he dies in 814. And then Otto comes to power in, I think, the 930s. So we have about 100 years of unaccounted history. So I need to kind of look into it again and kind of give an outline so I can give a small little look at that time period, that span of time, just so we're not skipping 100 years of history. Get it going from Charlemagne to Otto. No. What are we saying no about? I missed something. Okay, but yeah, we'll stop here. I know it's only about an hour. Of course, I don't normally go over about an hour. Well, I do. I'll do an hour. I normally do about an hour 15. But it's Friday. It's Friday, and I'm tired, and my voice. Oh yeah, no, he dies. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah, Charlemagne dies, unfortunately. Unfortunately, he was not immortal. But he lives on in my heart, and that's immortal enough for me. All right. This was good. This is a good little chapter. I'm liking this so far. I love Frankish history. It's fascinating to me. He doesn't get much into the nitty-gritty, which I like, which Pierre Riche does well. I like his book, The Carolingians, A Family That Built Europe. Great book. Highly recommend. Maybe we'll read that one day, because it's a lot more focused on Charlemagne himself. Could be interesting. Could be the play. Eventually we'll read it. But thank everybody who came out and listened to my ramblings. I greatly appreciate you lending me your ear. But before I go, don't forget to like and subscribe, leave a comment, let me know what you think of the stream, let me know what you think I could improve on. Yeah, suggestions for starting soon music. I mean, I know I have impeccable music taste, but sometimes, something new is nice. But thank you all for coming. You have a wonderful night.